talked about some of our job setup, let's go ahead and go to our main menu, and let's go ahead and go into modeling. The very first time you open modeling in a new project, you'll be prompted to save a new erection view for the first plan view of the model. We're going to go ahead and create an AB plan at 99 foot 2 inches. To do this, I'm going to go ahead and give the new view as AB plan and the elevation at 99-2. In SDS2, we do not use the apostrophe or the quotation for feet and inches. We just separate feet and inches with a dash or the minus sign. You can use the dash above your keypad or on your 10 key to add the dash in between the feet and the inches. For now, we'll go ahead and leave this primary. There are different options we can use, and we'll talk more about that when we start creating more views. The pen color and line type, we're going to leave default, but this is where you can set what the default line type is for the erection views when you detail them. There's a checkbox that make this my default view. This will always open your project when you click on modeling into this view that you've saved. You can save over that or change that later on with your open view command. And lastly, in this first window and any window that we create a new view or grid in, is a checkbox for detailing. For detailing takes this view and puts it in a separate list to keep my views separated from just modeling views and my views for detailing. I can, when I come down to detailing everything, detail any of the views I create in my model. This checkbox purely allows you to keep two separate lists of views. If you do not want two separate lists and you want everything listed together, you would just leave this unchecked. For our purposes in our model, we will not have a lot of views, so we'll go ahead and leave everything unchecked here and just have everything marked as not a for detailing view. I'll go ahead and say OK, and it'll be in my default view at my elevation of 99 foot 2. You can see up here on my toolbar, and the view is called AB plan. The construction lines that appear here in the middle of my screen are your 0, 0, and then the elevation of 99 foot 2 location of my model. If you ever have a BIM coordination or anything you need to provide a model for, and they provide a location that they want to coordinate an origin point or any other terminology like that, you would also coordinate that same point at this 0, 0 point of your model when you're getting started. Let's take a look at some of our default toolbar options. All of our commands will be able to be ran from our pull-down options here. As I go across here, you'll see the drop-downs have all the different commands listed amongst them. And some of these commands will also be on your default toolbar. Any of these drop-downs will have a dotted line across them, or any flyouts will also have a dotted line. Left-clicking on these once will tear these off into a floating window. If you are not running any commands, you'll notice that here in the upper left it says Select Items. Right now we are just in a selection mode that allows us to select, pan, or right-click for a menu. These are your button bindings that are showing you what your mouse buttons will do. The white is your left click, green is right click, and the yellow is middle click. To the right of that is your status line. As you hover over different items, it will tell you either the command name or what you're hovering on. It'll also give you any prompts during a command for selecting a specific type of item or accepting a change, things like that. To the right of that is the elevation. This is your current working elevation that you are in right now in this view. Right now I'm at elevation 99 foot 2, and the last view opened was AB plan. To the right of that is our depth check. This allows you to limit how far in and out of the current elevation or current working plane that you can see. Below here are our point locators. These will be what will affect our commands as we run them. They just change what our mouse will snap to within the model. The model tree on the right will fill out with everything visible within the current view as you navigate in the model. You can sort this tree by member piece marks, member numbers, or material piece marks. You can also use a find field down here to search for a specific piece mark, member number, or material piece mark, depending on what your view by is set to. All 4 toolbars on all 4 sides of the window here have little black arrows you can click on that will collapse that toolbar. You can also click on them again to expand them and get them showing again. You can modify what toolbar icons are on your default toolbar by going to your Options pull down and using Toolbar Configurations. If I click on my toolbar configuration, I can come in here and have a floating toolbar if I add any icons to it. Every command and icon is listed under the command group or the pull down menu that you can find them in at the top of your toolbar. You can also search for a specific command and populate the field here. Clicking and dragging an icon will allow you to place that icon anywhere in your toolbar, and dragging an icon off the toolbar into the white area will remove it from your default toolbar. Once you're done modifying your toolbar, you will say OK, and it'll prompt you, do you want to save your configuration change? If I say OK and save over the modeling 2020, it will then save over that default modeling window. Your toolbars are global files. This means that anyone running out of the same directory that are all running the default modeling 2020 toolbar, if one user makes a change and saves over that default toolbar, it makes that change for anybody that's using that default toolbar. So you can create your own custom toolbars by just adding your name or any sort of custom configuration name that you want for that toolbar. If you create a custom toolbar and want to set that as your default for every time you're open modeling, you'll go up to your Options pull down, User and Site Options, and go to Toolbars. And here, depending on which station you have, detailing station, a concrete station, modeling station, drafting station, etc., you can set the default toolbar for each window. Your modeling window, drawing editor window, assembly editor window, parametric modeling window, etc. So for my modeling, I could browse and pick one of the default toolbars or any sort of saved toolbar in here as my default modeling toolbar for every time that I, as a user, open this modeling window. These are stored based on your Windows user accounts. You can create keyboard shortcuts. If you'll notice under my model pull down here, you'll see that some of these icons have key shortcuts. These can be modified or added by going to your Options, Keyboard Configuration. This allows you to specify the shortcut by typing the letter combinations that you want and picking which command you want it to actually do. You can look through the list here to see what commands are already set up. And if you do make a command, you'll want to make sure that you most likely want it to run with both your Shift key on, or caps lock, and with it off. So you'll notice that most of these CA and Shift plus C and Shift plus A run the same command. On the left-hand side, we'll have some basic commands. The first one here is Display Options. Display Options allow you to turn on and off different items within your model. Unchecking the checkboxes here will turn all of them on or off. You also have the ability, if you select the same option here under Member Lines, to turn off member lines for specific zones, sequences, member types, or a specific member itself. And you can break down these things for any of these items more specifically by going to them here on the left side of the display options. If you make a specific change in here, you will see that the item and the display options are red. That means you have a custom display turned on for member lines. It's not just all on or all off. If you ever make it all on again, you can simply click the blue icon and it'll turn everything back selected as being visible. These windows are resizable, so you can say OK or apply and then OK, and it'll make those changes. Let's go ahead and start off here by setting up some of our grid lines. To do this, first we're going to set up actually construction lines to lay out some points to pick. So if we go ahead and look at sheet S1, which is your second floor, we will see that we have grids laid out and dimensioned for us. We're going to use our origin here of our construction lines at A and 3. So first, let's go ahead and lay out some construction lines. To add construction lines to your model, we're going to go ahead and go up to Model, Construction Lines, Add. You can see that CA is the keyboard shortcut, and it is also on your toolbar. There's a little icon for it right here on your left-hand default toolbar, Construction Line Add. If I go ahead and select that, it's going to start the command for me. You'll notice now that my feedback here is saying point location. My left click is locate, middle click is pan, right click is return. Return will cancel the command for you. You'll also notice that my point locators are set at auto point, which is the magnet, which allows me to have multiple point locators on at a time. What I want to do is I want to offset construction lines from the current construction lines in the model. So I'm going to use the point locator right here for base construction line. All I have to do is left click on it, and it'll switch to just that point locator. You'll see that as I hover over these construction lines, they will highlight. If I left click, it'll ask me to base construction line, my dimension from construction line that I just selected. So if we look at sheet S1, we're going to go horizontally, left to right, between A, and we're going to jump all the way to B in this case. So it's 25 foot 0. Again, we can go 25-0 for 25 foot 0 inches. There is a repeat factor if I need to make this same distance multiple times. So there is another 25 foot to C and 25 feet to D. If I go ahead and make a repeat factor of 3 and say add, it'll add 3 repeats in the positive X direction, which is to the right, because the dimension is positive. If I use add minus, it'll add to the left here, which would be a negative X direction. If I hit add, you'll see that I have my 3 construction lines in there for A, B, C, and D. My construction line for E is only 20 feet, so I can use 20 foot-0 and select add again. You'll notice that it's remembering from the last construction line added. If I ever want to add always from my base construction line that I selected, I would check on lock base position after every one that I added so that it resets the location back to the first construction line added. We'll take a look at this adding these horizontal construction lines below. So once I'm done adding horizontally here, I'm going to go ahead and hit exit, but I'm still in my add construction line command. I can see that here in my status line to add more construction lines. So in this case, if I go ahead and select my horizontal construction line, 27 foot 6, and if I lock base position and say add to add positively here, you'll notice that it stays locked. If I just add 27 foot 6 again, it'll just add it in the same location. So if I go ahead and type in 55 feet for the next location, which is 27 foot 6 further up, and say add again, you'll see that it adds it up another 27 foot 6. There is also an add plus or minus, which will add to either side of the selected line. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. I'm going to hit exit, and I'm going to come in here and use the center grid line 2, which what will become grid line 2, and I'm going to offset 7 foot 6 on either side. This is going to be where the grids 1.9 and 2.1 will be. So if I come in here and say 7 foot 6, in this case lock base position will always apply when I use the plus or minus. So this does not have to be checked, but it'll still always base off the selected line. If I say add plus/minus, it adds to both sides 7 foot 0 from the construction line. While we're in here, we'll go ahead and hit exit and add one more back up here for what will be 8.3. So we'll say 10-0 and say add. And when I'm done, I can hit exit, and then I can either right click to return, or escape will allow me to return as well. To know that I'm out of a command, I will look up here and make sure that I see select items, which means I'm no longer running a command. Currently, our construction lines are infinite. they run all the way in and out of the screen. As I zoom out or zoom in, they will always go to the edge of the screen. If you ever want to add a finite construction line between two specific points, you can use the finite construction line add. In this case, basing off of an infinite will still give you an infinite, so we need to change our point locator to intersection of construction lines. You could use auto point, but the point of setting up construction lines is to give us exact intersections that we want to use for our point locations. There are cases when auto point is useful, but there are cases where auto point may select a point you don't expect it to actually select, depending on what other point locators are in that same area. So for us, for most of our cases here, especially this first modeling phase, we're going to stick with intersection of construction lines most likely for all points we pick. Later on, we'll show some more useful point locators, and as you get more familiar with SDS2 and modeling, then you can use auto point when you know exactly what you're looking for or how to make sure you're picking what you want to pick. So with it set to intersection of construction lines, I can pick 2 points. Now, when I'm picking points, both points can have a different point locator selected for it. So as I pick my first point here, you'll notice the point locators here swap back to auto point. I'm going to swap my second point back to intersection of construction lines, and I'm going to pick a second point here. You can see that as I pick my 2 points, it only puts a construction line between the 2 points I selected. If I then use base construction line and base off of a finite construction line, you'll see that it only bases a finite construction line as well. So whatever the construction lines are created is what will be based off of. If I hit right click to cancel or escape to cancel, I have these construction lines. By default, if I try to click and drag or window or anything like that, they are not edited by default. If I want to edit a construction line, I can go up to my model pull down, construction lines, and I can say edit, or CE is my keyboard shortcut, and I can select either by boxing a window like that from right to left with a crossing window, or I can just select one and either right click for a menu or hit enter, which is the OK. Then it allows me to edit my construction lines. Because these are finite, I can make a decision to say, okay, well, I want these infinite. It'll make a change to that to be an infinite construction line. If I want to delete construction lines that I've added that I don't want anymore, I can go up to my model pull down, construction lines, and I can say erase, or CS is the keyboard shortcut. So if I use CS on my keyboard, it's going to prompt me in my status line here to locate construction lines to erase. So if I select a construction line, I can also use Shift to add to my selection. If I hold Shift and left click, I can pick these construction lines that I want to get rid of and hit enter, or if you're not sure what the accept option is, you can right click and say OK or cancel, or the keyboard shortcuts for OK or cancel, which are enter and escape. And now it'll delete those construction lines. If I ever want to verify a distance between 2 points I created, I can go ahead and use my ruler command. In this case, the ruler command is on the left-hand toolbar here. I can use my intersection of construction lines to measure between 2 points. And you will see that I get a distance in the X and the Y in both the feet-inches and the total inches. With this command still running, if I picked 2 more points, I will see that I get this total distance in the X and the Y, and there is an angle between those 2 points I picked. My first 2 points ran horizontally, my second 2 points ran diagonally here, and the distance between the 2 lines that are created between each sets of points is 19.29 degrees, or on the angle tab here, I can see that it is a bevel of 4 3/16 to 12, or 0.3367 radians. When I'm done, I can close this and right click to cancel my ruler command. You can also have permanent dimensions in your model between your points if you want to leave dimensions visible. On the left-hand toolbar, you can look at the icon here for Add Dimensions. This is also under your model pull down. Under Dimension, you can say Add or DA. I pick 2 points again here, intersection of construction lines. You'll see that it will keep allowing me to add a dimension to my model, and when I'm done, I can right-click. So these are going to be physical dimensions that are left between 2 points. I can select these with my Shift key or window them and use my Delete key to just get rid of those. You can also turn on and off model dimensions in your display options. On the bottom right here are model dimensions. So if you want to toggle those on and off, you can uncheck those or show those in your model without having to delete them and re-add them. Another thing you may have noticed while picking points is some temporary construction lines showing up as you hover over a specific location. If I were to add a construction line, if I hover my mouse over the locator here for about 3 seconds, I get a temporary point that you can see will stay at that location. This will project 45-degree construction lines to noticed intersections that are within the current locations. I can hover and create as many of these temporary points as I want to get noticed intersections between these points. Once I pick my first point or second point, these will all go away, and I have a new set of temporary points. If you do not want to have these noticed intersection points, you can simply go up to your Locate pull down, go to Point Location Configuration, and uncheck the option to create notice points on hover, and the Add 45-degree construction lines at notice points. These will prevent that situation from showing up. Now that we have our construction lines laid out for our points, let's talk about adding grids to our model. Grids within SDS2 are views in your 3D model. So once we create our grids, we will be able to open any of those views and view them or model in them as well. To add a grid line, go ahead and go up to your File pull down under Views Grids and select Add Grid Line. You can also use the keyboard shortcut GS, or on your default toolbar, your Add Grid Line is in the upper left of your toolbar. With that command started, I want to make sure I use intersection of construction lines, and then I'm going to start picking my points that define my grid locations. When you're creating a grid, the order you pick your points from left to right, or right to left, or bottom to top, or top to bottom, affects which way the view will be looking in your 3D model. If I go ahead and try to define my grid A here, which is running along this vertical line, if I start from bottom and go up, you'll see that there is an arrow pointing to the left. This shows you the direction in which the view is going to be created. If I select my second point, I will get my new view window. This is where I can define the view. I'm going to go ahead and say A. Auto pin to this view is for member pins. By default, member pins are disabled. Member pins can be used to pin to other members or views, so if one member or view moves, other members will be moved with it. By default, the member pins are disabled, like I stated. These can be turned off and then auto-pinned to any view that has this auto-pin checkbox on. For our basic training, we're not going to be using any auto-pinning, and since the pins are disabled to start with, it doesn't matter if this is checked or not. But if you do not want this to ever be able to be auto-pinned to, you can uncheck this, and then anytime you auto-pin, it will not be a valid view to pin to. We also have finite. Because we picked 2 specific points, we will have a finite grid line between those exact points we picked. We have a grid bubble setback of how far we want our grid bubble to display in the model, and the relative view depth top and bottom. This is the elevations in which this grid will be visible. So I want this to go from 99.2, which is the bottom of base plate for our model, and I want it to go up above our 3rd floor. Our 3rd floor is at 126.0, so I'm just going to go ahead and type in 130-0 to put it above the top of the roof. This is a primary grid. We have secondary, dimension only, and placement only. These allow you to turn on and off the specific view types within display options here, as well as secondary dimension only give us different detailing results in our erection view detailing. We'll talk more about that when we actually get to detailing erection views. Our depth check is the default in and out of that view. In this case, on grid line A, 3 foot in and out will be left and right of that plane that we create. I'm going to check this on by default. And then our grid pen line color and grid line type will be the line type and color of the grid in the model, as well as what pen color and line type is used for detailing and erection view details. Make this view my default, which we already talked about when creating the very first view in the model. We'll make this the view that your model will always open to when you launch your modeling window. And for detailing, we'll put it into a separate for detailing list. We're going to leave all these unchecked at the bottom here and just say OK. You'll see that now I have grid line A and I can add another grid. So if I move over here 25 feet and pick grid line B, I can simply type in B and it remembers from the last grid I added. So I can say OK, and then I have grid line B. There's also a point locator like base construction line, but specifically for grids, which is base grid line. If I use this command and select the grid that I have in my model, it will offset from that grid whatever dimension I type in here. So I type in 25 foot 0. The new grid line will say is C, and it remembers all the information from the grid I'm basing from. If I say add, it'll add my C in here. I can come in here and also type D and say add again, and it puts it another distance from the last one. So I can come in here and say 20 foot 0 and say the last one here is E and say add. When I'm done, I can hit cancel, and then I'm out of my actual grid add command. So if I wanted to add my grids horizontally, I would come up here and start my add grid again, change my point locator back to intersection of construction line, and I'll go ahead and define my points left to right, so I'm looking from the bottom up. We'll call this grid 3, setbacks at 6 foot 0. I'm going to go ahead and make my top 130 foot 0, primary, in and out at 3 foot, and say OK. And the same for grid line 2 and grid line 1. If I look at my views here, I have an 8.3, a 1.9, and a 2.1. So if I wanted to create my points here for 8.3, I can make this a secondary. And if I want to differentiate that from my other views, I can make the grid bubble setback different. Let's say I want to make that 3 foot. And if I wanted to, I can make a different pen color or line type for my secondary grids. We're going to leave these default, but if you'd like to change those, feel free. When I say OK, you can see that it pulls it back not quite as far from the points I picked. I can do the same for grid lines 1.9 and 2.1. When I'm done adding my grids, I can right click to say I'm done, and now I have a majority of my grids in my model. The only thing I do not have currently is my plan views. I only have my 199 foot 2 elevation plan view. To change an elevation in my model, I can use my plan view command, which is on the toolbar icon right here, or under my view pull down, I can use plan view or the letter V. This will ask me for the elevation that I'd like to go to. So I'm going to type in my second floor elevation, which is 114 foot 6, and say OK. You'll notice that it looks pretty much the same, but in my elevation now I'm currently at 114 foot 6. If I wanted to save this as my second floor, I could come up here to my Save View As command, or under File, Views Grids, Save View As. I can give this a name, second floor, make this a primary, and go ahead and say OK. If I wanted to save my roof plan, which is at 126 foot 0, I can go ahead and say Plan View, 126 foot 0, and save the view again. To change between all views, or open any view that I have in my model here, I can do a couple different things. I have an Open View command, which is the folder icon here. Under my File pull-down, Views Grids, I can select Open View or Control+O. Or, if I want to open one of my actual grid lines here, I can just double-click on the actual bubbles, and I will open that grid. If I want to go back to my AB plan, I can double-click on AB plan, and I'll have it in my model. On top of finite grids like this and infinite grids like our plan views are, I can edit any of these grids and modify them into an infinite view if I want to. All I have to do is go up to my selection filter here, change it to grid lines, and I can just double click on the actual line and tell it that I want it to be infinite. Now the grid line becomes an infinite grid and will always be at the edges of my screen here. If I want to change it back, I can just check it back on here, adjust my bottom and top elevations back, and they'll be back to our finite grids. I also have curved grid line options. I have a 3-point curved grid and a radius curved grid. My 3 points, it'll ask me to pick 3 points first, where it starts, where it ends, and a third point along that arc to define the actual radius of the arc. If I give this a name, we'll just call this test and say OK. You can see that from the first point to the second point at the radius I defined, it will be built counterclockwise. So if I picked bottom and then top, it comes this way. If I picked top and then bottom, it would have completed the portion right here that's missing. You'll notice that there is a center point to it. You can turn off the center point of your grids. In your display options, you can say Show Center of Curved Grid Lines. You can uncheck that, and it will not display the center of curved grids in your model. So I also have a radius curved grid, which will allow me to pick a intersection, provide a name, grid bubble setback if I want it. Do I want an arc or do I want a full circle? And what is the radius of that arc or circle? So if I typed in 30 foot for the radius and I want it to be a circle, I can say OK. And then it's going to ask me to locate where I want my grid bubble to be placed. So I can select the point and I'll get my grid bubble at that location. This is a full circle, and I can do the same thing with my intersection of construction lines. If I were to call this test 3, make it an arc, let's put it at 100 foot. It's going to ask me for now my grid bubble locations. Again, these curved grids, or the arcs, will go counterclockwise. So if I wanted at the bottom down here, I could start from here and then pick here, and it'll give me the bottom part of that arc. Once I'm done creating my curved grids here, I can just right click and it'll cancel the command. Curved grids cannot be opened. If I set my selection filter back to default, they cannot be opened like a straight grid can, but they will show up as grid lines in your plan view or elevation view, erection view details. To delete these, you can go up to your File pull-down, Views Grids, Delete View. The only view you cannot delete is the view you are currently in. So if I select all 3 of those tests, say OK, it will get rid of those extra views for me. Again, I can hit Control O or Open View and change into any of these views that I have created. So if I go to Roof Plan, it'll open up my roof plan at elevation 126 foot 0. I can go back to my AB plan, and it'll jump back down to my AB plan at elevation 99 foot 2. If you had a grid in here in the wrong location and you wanted to fix that, you have a couple options. You can go to your selection filter, select grid lines, and select the grid. And if you right click, you have a move grid option. This is also available in your file, views grids. You have the ability to move grid. This will allow you to pick an intersection of where you want to start the move from and where you want to move it to. You can also, if you have it in the wrong spot and you don't just want to move it, let's say it's at the wrong angle, you can simply run the grid add again, pick your two new points, call it the same name, and say OK. It'll ask you, do you want to replace existing one? You can say yes, and it will just replace it in its new position. So if I put this in here wrong this way, I could pick these 2 points again, call it the same name, and say OK, and yes to replace. It'll go back to where it was. If I just misspelled the name, you can go into your File, Views Grids, Open View. You can select the view and select Rename. So if I wanted to make my roof all caps, I can say Rename to Roof Plan, say OK. I can select Second Floor in all caps, say OK. And now I've renamed those views. If I say OK to one of my erection views here, let's say I open my grid line A, I can see that now they're in all caps.